This year I ran my first marathon. But this is not that story. I'll get back to that. This story begins like 15 or so years ago in a small town in rural New Jersey. This little town that I grew up in is in a county that voted for Donald Trump and has continued to vote Republican for my entire life. This little bastion of red in a sea of otherwise northeastern blue is where I got my start. And there's nothing wrong with where I grew up. It was just a not particularly kind place for a razor-thin band geek, because you were your standing in sports. Nothing would give me a greater sense of anxiety than walking into gym class and find out we would be playing 3-on-3 basketball, because I would be representing 33% of a team. So invariably, uncoordinated enough to dribble a basketball, I would be paired up with two of the best athletes in high school. So Team 6 would be something like Joseph Peniak, Kevin Daly, and Charles. Two of those names were so famous at Delaware Valley Regional High School, I'm assuming everybody in this room has heard of them. And me. And the feeling of anxiety that would give me was like my skin was trying to recede back into my spine and take every finger and bone and just fiber of me with it. But of course, that's not how that works. But that feeling of anxiety, that uncomfortableness, was my relationship with sports for the longest time. But when I was 22, I packed up my car and I headed westward. And not only would I be moving to a new large city, I was going to be moving to California, America's America. A place where people had been reinventing themselves for like 3,000 years. When I arrived, I really wanted to assimilate to this new culture. But as an ungifted athlete, I was having trouble finding something. So I decided to try this thing that had been plastered everywhere called yoga. And I didn't know where to start, so I found a studio on Ventura Boulevard that seemed to fit the bill of a yoga studio. But the first hurdle I ran into is that I don't speak Sanskrit. And there's all these words I didn't know: vinyasa, flow, Bikram, Ashtanga, hatha. So I was a waiter at the time, so I just chose the first one that would work with my schedule, the 10:30 prenatal yoga class. The women in this room laughed. The guys will get it. So the next day I arrive. I, of course, rented my yoga mat. I rolled it out in the front of the class. I took my sneakers off. I had my board shorts, my white undershirt, and I began my tenure in yoga. Now, I was the only man in the room, and I was expecting to be a little uncomfortable, but not to this degree. But as it turns out, I'm really good at yoga, because the instructor would say things like, "If it's available to you, touch your toes." And of course, that is very easy for me. I'm actually fantastic at yoga. So this goes on for a while, but then I started to feel that anxiety again. And I couldn't figure out why, because again, I was doing fantastic. And I started to worry that I was doing such a good job that everybody around me, the opposite was happening, that I was feeling good, but everybody around me was starting to feel anxious about their inability to be as good as me. But the truth is that this is my first time. How was I supposed to know that I was supposed to start with prenatal level 2? So anyway, I'm feeling good about myself, and this goes on for a while. But sometime around the third time that we sat and slowly rocked back and forth while saying hello to the little being inside of us, that I started to put a couple things together. The most jarring, of course, being that there is no word prenatal in any language. But there is a word prenatal, which I had not heard since I last stayed home to watch The Price is Right from high school. The realization that I was in a pregnancy class, there's the rest of you, hit me like a freight train. And I could suddenly feel these icy daggers shooting at me from every angle, all these women just shooting at me. And with my head between my ankles, I decided I was going to finish this class. This is going to be my victory. So I did. I finished the class, I rolled the mat, I returned it, I put my sneakers back on, and I left. I didn't say a word. Now I feel like maybe I could have diffused it with a little bit of a joke, but that was not who I was back in the time. So people always ask me, because I love telling this story, and they always ask, what did I think that the women were thinking about having this man in the classroom with them? And while I'll never know, I like to joke that this is California, and perhaps I identified as a pregnant woman. I started this story by saying that I ran my first marathon this year, and this is my new beginning, because after having crossed off baseball, basketball, football, wrestling, soccer, and reading comprehension, from the list of things that I'm good at, I'm ecstatic to find something I can finally excel at while being an otherwise unremarkable athlete. Thank you.